morning, everyone, and welcome to the very first panel discussion of the World Bank Group Youth Summit 2025. My name is Alla Ivanov, and I serve as this year's pitch competition co-lead. I am very excited to be here, and I hope you are as well, because we are kicking things off with a very important conversation that I hope will set the tone for the rest of the summit. How can young people not only raise awareness on critical issues, but also bring about meaningful change in their communities and beyond? And we will look at this through the lens of youth-led civil society organizations. As I am sure everybody in this room knows, and those of you joining online as well, this generation of young people does not ask for permission to lead. You are building your own platforms. You are pushing the boundaries of what we know possible. However, a key question remains: how can we, across international development and civil society, ensure that youth voices are not only heard, but that they lead to lasting impact? Unfortunately, I personally do not have the perfect answer for this. However, we brought an exceptional panel today that might just point us into the right direction. So let me introduce you. We have here Mearns, Global Director for Social Development here at the World Bank. He's bringing the institutional perspective on how the bank evolved its engagement with youth and civil society. Then we have Pauline Deneufbourg, Youth Empowerment Specialist at UNDP. She has over 15 years of experience in helping youth participate in peace building and governance efforts across Africa and the Arab region. Benjamin Lutz, he is Director of Youth Summits at Young Professionals in Foreign Policy and incoming chair of the Y20 and Y7 summits. He is shaping how youth voices connect with global diplomacy and policy. As we begin our conversation, I would like to remind you to keep your remarks short and concise so we can keep the energy moving and have times for everybody's insights. And for you in audience here at the World Bank headquarters, and for you joining online, please do keep a mental tab open for all your tough questions, because we will have a Q&A at the end. And with that, let me dive right in. I would like you to share, oh my God, I forgot our online panelist. Is she online? Because I don't see her on the screen. Well, we also have Anoushka Sinha. There she is. This is Anoushka Sinha. She's joining us online from India, and she is a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, as well as the founder of the Anupam Foundation, leading bold youth-led initiatives that empower women and children through education and development across 40 countries. So now, thank you all for being here. All right, so I would like us to start and ask you to share your experiences about how has the landscape of youth-led civil society had changed in the past few years, and what is the unique value of these initiatives for underserved communities and populations? Robin, why don't you start us off?
Thank you very much, Alla. And wow, so exciting to see you all here. A very, very warm welcome to the World Bank. Today is finally here. We've been eagerly awaiting this, and I'm sure you have too. So thanks very much for the question. And you've already heard today from Ajay and from Axel, and they've shared a perspective on the importance of engagement with youth. As you know, the World Bank Group's mission is to end poverty on a livable planet. And it's really putting youth at the forefront of development, creating opportunities for young people to thrive as entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers. It's an absolutely top priority for us. So you've heard from Ajay about the importance of jobs. You all know how critical it is for youth to have access to jobs and economic opportunity. But in order to do that, it requires engagement as well. And so, you know, we increasingly recognize youth as critical drivers of social change and economic growth. What about some of the demographic trends? We know there's something like 1.2 billion young people in the world today, accounting for 16% of the global population. Young people are a powerful and growing force, driving economies, innovation, and leading social change. So not only is the population of young people growing, 85% of that 1.2 billion reside in low and middle income countries. And actually half of that number live in fragile and conflict affected settings, which makes the challenge of engagement all the more critical and important. We've seen progress in the last several decades in areas such as education, health, digital, for example. 79% of all youth globally do have access to the internet. 86% of people aged 15 or older have had access to formal education. Teen pregnancy and birth rates have been falling in the last 20 years. But having said that, life as a young person today remains full of challenges. And I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you and our other panelists on all of this. Let me talk about some of the challenges that I see. In areas such as education and health, 20% of youth are actually not in education, training, or employment. 2/3 of that number are young women. Youth unemployment rates are about 3% higher than those of older adults. And only 1/3 of young people are actually satisfied with the jobs that they have, for those who actually have jobs. Young women face significant safety challenges, including sexual violence and child marriage. 13% of teenage girls give birth before turning 18. Climate change compounds challenges. 1 in 7 young people experience depression and other mental health challenges. In our work in the World Bank's Social Development Department, we're trying to address these in several ways. And we aim, to make youth equal partners in the development process. Let me just give a couple of examples, and I'll be brief. We put out a report called Changemakers that was launched back in January. And this underscores that youth-led initiatives are absolutely crucial for delivering locally driven solutions that are tailored to particular contexts. It is about creating jobs and economic opportunities, but it's also about engagement. And it's really about empowering youth to directly address the needs of marginalized groups, especially those in fragile and conflict-affected settings. Putting youth at the center of development, these initiatives help mobilize resources, ensure local ownership, and advocate for the inclusion of the most underserved populations. Finally, let me just mention one other initiative, which is called Civic. We're in the process of setting this up. This is the Civil Society and Social Innovation Alliance, and it's aiming to replace our previous program, the Global Program for Social Accountability. And it's really about systematically engaging with civil society and other non-state actors to ensure that citizen-led solutions are integrated into development programs. Now, under Civic, the intent is to have a series of platforms, thematic platforms, and one of these will be around youth engagement. It aims to empower youth-led organizations, providing grants, coalition building opportunities, and fostering cross-country partnership among young changemakers. It's directly aligned with the findings from the Changemakers report. In regions like Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, youth-led initiatives are about addressing gender-specific barriers, providing safe transport, childcare, reproductive health services, and protections against gender-based violence, among many other things, all tailored to the needs of young women, a critical area that was featured in the Changemakers report. Let me stop there. Thanks, Ala.
Thank you, Robin. And speaking of youth-led initiatives, I would like to go next to Anoushka. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm already so inspired. It's such a great start. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. One effective strategy for me has been really combining localized problem identification with scalable action pathways. And by that, I mean, we've really transitioned from one-off awareness drives to actually talking about how we can ensure that there's longitudinal community engagement. So one thing that's worked for us in the past decade, we've seen that youth-led civil society has really evolved from informal, volunteer-driven collectives to increasingly structured entities that really contribute directly to service delivery and meaningful dialogue, advocacy, and accountability. And one great example that I know a lot of young people in this room might know of is the UN Youth Office that works to champion and advocate for young people's rights, ensuring that their meaningful engagement and decision-making happens, especially on decisions that affect them and their future. I'd like to quote a report by the UN data from 2023 that states over 60% of youth-led organizations globally now implement community programs in addition to advocacy, a significant shift from the advocacy-only mindset that we used to have, where young people were only seen as symbols of tokenism, where they could only be at these seats to talk about these issues, but not to actually serve a proper purpose. So the comparative advantage I see as someone who's founded a youth-led organization myself is in our agility, our cultural proximity, and our grassroots presence, which really enables us to reach the underserved populations directly, often those who are overlooked by the traditional actors. And I'll give you an example. Our foundation has designed community-based interventions in hard-to-reach areas, including low-tech educational programming for out-of-school adolescents and teens, as well as awareness campaigns that use vernacular formats to address gender-based barriers to education, as well as building peer-to-peer communities that really make sense for those young people that are not really aware of where they have to start. And these approaches are really grounded in the socioeconomic context of these communities. And very important thing that I have to point out right now is they are co-designed with the local youth facilitators to ensure that they're sustainable and they're relevant to these young people.
Thank you so much, Anoushka. Benjamin, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Welcome to this summit. Thrilled to be invited. I'm really appreciative today. So I'm the Youth Summits Director for Young Professionals in Foreign Policy, YPFP, something I think all of you should be well involved with. We have chapters all across the globe. And when we talk about civil society opportunities that directly engage youth, I myself am part of that youth category, so go us, but also the ability to connect on the professional space. Axel mentioned him starting out as a YP. I would say all of you are also YPs. Gives it an opportunity to really collaborate. And that's one of the things I joined Young Professionals in Foreign Policy and why I strongly encourage you all to at least look it up at the bare minimum. The Youth Summits program that I help lead is for the Y7 and the Y20 summits. I'm assuming most of you are familiar with the G7 and the G20. If not, really quickly, those are the top 7 economies in the world that meet every year, or the top 20 economies. The United States is in both of those 2 groups. And so there is a youth version that advises G7 and G20 leaders every year, which I help select, train, and support the American delegates that go. I've been doing that since 2019. In the year 2020, the US hosted the G7. So we also hosted the Y7 on top of supporting the American delegates. And next year, the United States is hosting the G20. And in 2027, the United States is hosting the G7. So really big initiatives coming to this country very soon to support youth initiatives from all of those countries, bringing those youth to the summit to talk about intense global challenges, whether that's peace and security, climate change, really the themes of this summit, just at that specific space, but directly advising the leaders of the G7 and G20 countries to incorporate youth perspectives in their final communique negotiations. It's a really kind of unheard of platform for youth voices to directly be in front of global leaders, and something I find really powerful. And on the point of underserved populations, the really heart of this question is really paramount in how we run the application cycle, at least for the United States delegates. But I know many of the other G7 and G20 country youth committees also really have a priority on ensuring the youth of their country are well represented in all the definitions of what that may be, whether that's a minority community, whether that's a religious space, whatever it could be. Ensuring that those youth have the ability to be at that table ensures that even more perspectives across the youth space of those countries are at those negotiation platforms. And that's really, really vital. 2 weeks ago was the Y7 Summit, which was in Canada. I was there supporting and observing the American delegation and preparing for us hosting next year. And it was really powerful to see how the Canadian organizers included Indigenous elements, bilingual elements, the things that make Canada as a big part of the summit. There were youth from all across the G7 there, but The underlying factor was we are in Canada, we are in Ottawa, so let's learn how this country deals with communities, underserved populations, and youth voices. The Y20 this year is in South Africa, which I will be going to as well later in August, to observe and support for next year, but also for the handover, as it's important to have that sustainability between year-to-year summits, since we are hosting the Y20 in 2026. So I'll wrap up there just saying that there are many, many, many ways to get involved. The Y7 and Y20 are just a tiny sliver of opportunities to get youth voices like yourselves on the global platform. And I'm just thrilled to see the interconnections you all make today and tomorrow and onwards. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Benjamin. And it's so good to hear that you focus not only on youth voices, but on diverse youth voices. With that, I would like to hear from Pauline and how this landscape looks like from UNDP.
Thank you, Ala, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening for those who are online, connecting from somewhere else. Let me start thanking the World Bank for the invitation. Very happy to be here and to see such a packed room at an early time in the morning here in DC. And very, very thrilled to engage with all of you in the coming 2 days. So it's quite obvious, I believe, that we are now evolving in a new changing environment. For many reasons. First of all, I think it was mentioned by my peer colleagues before, but we live in a digital era, right? This is quite obvious. And so we know that young people and youth-led organizations have to adapt to this new environment and to this emergence of digital tools and AI. I will talk a bit more about that later. We also live in a community-driven environment where young people also have to adapt. And that brings a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. And let me just give a couple of examples on how UNDP tries to support young people in this new emerging environment. So we do leverage at UNDP innovative and digital tools for young people to increase their participation in governance processes, decision-making processes, and also to reach underrepresented populations. At UNDP, we have built and we support youth leadership programs. Like at the regional level, in Africa, we have built the Youth Connect program that enables young people to connect and to build their skills and capacities in social entrepreneurship. In the Arab states, we have supported the Youth Leadership Program that has supported so far more than 20,000 young people and supported 5,000 projects focusing on fostering social innovation with a strong emphasis on gender equality. Let me perhaps zoom in on a couple of other examples. The first one is on the Youth Peace and Security Agenda, which is a key priority area of support for UNDP across the world. And that translates in several initiatives towards young people and youth-led organizations. So the Youth Peace and Security Agenda consists in supporting youth-inclusive political processes. And to that end, UNDP has developed and launched a report, a guide last year called Fostering Youth Inclusive Political Processes. And I'm mentioning it because this guide highlighted a number of challenges and opportunities for young people to actually increase their participation in decision-making processes in this new context. One good example, I believe, is the young people's participation in electoral processes, which is also key and crucial for UNDP. It's part of our mandate. And for us, it's key to ensure that young people can have a role, a meaningful role in electoral processes. Not only that they can run campaigns, but that they can also participate actively in monitoring the elections, in fact-checking information circulating during electoral processes. Last example I wanted to give, coming back to the digital era that we are all evolving in. Another example that UNDP has been supporting in the past years is the Generation 17 initiative. Together with Samsung, we have partnered to leverage digital tools and the power of digital tools and social media and the power of storytelling to amplify young people's voices across the world towards the achievements of the SDGs. So now we have a cohort of more than 15 young people working for different SDGs across the world. who mobilize their communities at the local, national, or regional level to really amplify their voices and raise awareness on the SDGs and amplify the work that is done at the grassroots level, and that can have an impact at the global level. So to wrap up, yes, we live in a changing environment, fast changing environment, which brings a lot of challenges, but again, a lot of opportunities. And I think it's up to us together to seize these opportunities and to build young people's leadership and to foster their participation using those new tools that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You all touched upon strategies and projects you have in your own institutions to engage with youth. And I would like to know, what obstacles have you faced, especially when working in challenging and fragile context, and how did you overcome them? And just for the interest of time, choose one obstacle and one solution. Benjamin, let's start with you.
Thank you. So I'm actually going to talk about something different. My full-time job is not the Youth Summits director work. It's at a global peace-building organization called Mediators Beyond Borders International, which really answers this exact question directly. If we work in fragile contexts globally, supporting peace-building initiatives on the ground directly through primarily youth-led civil society organizations in those other countries. And the largest challenge that we've noticed, which Robin mentioned, is access to technology. I mean, I know there are many of you online, many of you in here who are on your phones and taking notes, which is great, but a lot of communities don't have reliable and consistent access to technology. And so technological literacy is quite down, quite frankly, because there's not consistent engagement there. But when we do global peace-building work, a lot of it is through support, coaching, mentoring, social cohesion, dialogue, all of these great elements, but require some element of technology and technological access to be effective, whether that's sharing documents and resources, whether that's consistent checking in or mentorship, whatever the specific context is needed. Of course, it's very different depending on the local community, the language, the country, the religion, et cetera. And so one of the ways we've gotten around that and is being proactive in adding Wi-Fi cafes or technological literacy sessions before we even start the peace building work. So they're still currently in that conflict, but ensuring that they have those specific tools will help them even further to ensure no backsliding. And so some of that is specific funding for a Wi-Fi cafe, and that also might not be where they live. So transportation and potentially even a day's summit or food. I mean, you have to really think about all of the community elements of a social program, not just let's stop the violence or let's have a dialogue session. And so technology has been a really big boon in a lot of ways of directly accessing global spaces through Mediators Beyond Borders and other peace building initiatives out there. But ensuring that those are consistent, reliable, and connected are really vital. And so through our partners all across the globe, again, depending on the specific context and culture, has been a way to support on-the-ground initiatives more directly. And so we've become kind of quite creative in how we fund and support local initiatives. Instead of just giving funding for XYZ program, it's funding for a computer for the village, or again, whatever might be specific and necessary for that conflict. Technology has been that undercurrent and a challenge, but one that requires more creative thinking and more proactivity.
Thank you, Benjamin. It's so great to hear about this very practical solution that you implement. Pauline, what are you doing at UNDP on this front?
So it's a pity that you only allow me one challenge because I had a full list, but I will just pick one, which actually echoes a little bit what Benjamin just shared. It's access to information. I mean, let's face it, the reason why everybody is here in the room or online is because you got the information, right? But this is unfortunately not the case for everyone. So information remains a privilege, I believe. And so what UNDP is doing to ensure that everybody has access to information and to quality information, different things, but as Benjamin said, I think we have to be creative, and we've proved that being creative, we can allow access to information. So sometimes, for instance, internet is not the best way, so we need to use more traditional ways to reach population in their communities and to provide the information that they need. And to also disseminate information. So one example that I can quote is, again, coming back to the youth peace and security agenda that I mentioned before, as part of the support that UNDP is providing. We have supported youth-led organizations in the Great Lakes region in Africa to using community radios, so very local radios, to disseminate information across the communities, across the villages in their local language. And that made a lot of difference because it was a good way to actually disseminate key messages on youth peace and security, to debate on key issues that matter for the population, for the youth population in their communities, but using local tools and local language. So an adapted information circulation is important. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Pauline. Pauline and Benjamin, you set the bar quite high. So Robin, why don't you tell us what the bank is doing?
Thanks, Ala. And I think there were two parts to the question. So you're asking about, what are effective strategies for engaging youth, particularly in FCV, fragile and conflict-affected settings, and then about overcoming obstacles. So let me start with one obstacle. I'll stick to one. So let me start with the effective strategies. So I mentioned the Changemakers report that we launched back in January. And what it highlights is that the most effective youth programs are those that actually engage young people as agents of change, not just as beneficiaries. And that means involving youth at all stages of program preparation, design, implementation, and so on. Civic, that I mentioned, that we're just setting up, the Civil Society and Social Innovation Alliance, is about supporting this, making sure that youth aren't just participants, but leaders in shaping the development agenda. This is just as even more important, I would say, in fragile and conflict-affected settings, where youth often face insecurity, lack of resources. And in these settings, the focus has to be on social cohesion and civic engagement. Let me just give an example of this, and with some similarities to Pauline's response on the importance of engaging young people in local governance, in good governance. The World Bank is supporting a program across the northern Gulf of Guinea region. This is in northern Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Togo, Benin, just south of the Sahel region. And it's about community-led initiatives that bolster and build social cohesion, trying to prevent the spillover effects of violence from the Sahel to the north. And in doing this, a key part of the program is about engaging youth. I just came back from Ghana last week and was there for the opening of a youth parliament in Tamale in northern Ghana. This is one of several youth parliaments that are being supported under this program. It's a way of supporting youth leaders to be able to advocate for their interests, to be able to engage with policymakers and influence many things that help shape the lives of young leaders. So empowering young people to be active citizens and leaders of change. In terms of obstacles, the one I would highlight in FCV settings is safety. Youth have to be protected to be able to engage meaningfully in development programming. The Changemakers report stresses this, that youth in fragile and conflict-affected settings need safe spaces and settings that can help foster trust and collaboration. And so the civic platform is aiming to build on this and support this, to give spaces where young people can co-develop and co-lead development programs with local youth leaders, making sure that they have the resources, the support, and the protection that they need.
Thank you, Robin. You're absolutely right. Trust, it's something we really have to work on and ensure that young people really trust these organizations. I have one more question. It is the easiest one by far. So I would like to know, how can youth-led civil society organization and established institutions build more effective and equitable partnerships? How international financial institutions such as the World Bank can play a supporting role in youth-led civil society? And as you said, Robin, recognize young people as genuine agents of change. And I would like to start this question with Anoushka.
Thank you. I just want to point out that for the last question, a lot of people mentioned that there's technological gaps and we need to build safe spaces. And I actually have to give a shout out to Pauline because I started my advocacy journey at 10 years old. And the first thing I did as a tool was use community radios. I was one of the youngest members of the press, and I ran 3 seasons on a community radio talking about these issues that affect young people the most. So I have to say it's very effective for sure. And coming to your question, Ella, youth-led civil society and established institutions can really build more equitable partnerships by grounding collaboration with shared governance, not just tokenistic consultation or one-off kind of thing. This includes providing core, unrestricted funding, reducing administrative burdens, and really integrating youth-led monitoring and evaluation processes into their functioning. And international financial organizations, such as the World Bank, can really play that catalytic role by embedding youth-led initiatives within their formal development pipelines. And I know that there are a lot of programs right now at the bank, like the Solutions for Youth Employment program that I'm a part of as an advisor. We can also think about including and establishing dedicated youth innovation funds, simplifying access to financing for unregistered or nascent organizations that are led by young people at the grassroots level, because that's something that we struggle a lot with, and really institutionalizing youth representation in program design, evaluation, and resource allocation frameworks. I think ultimately it all comes down to what we're saying is meaningful youth engagement must be underpinned by mutual accountability from both sides of the party, be it the young person, be it the organization, structural inclusion, and the recognition of youth not just as beneficiaries or tokens, but as our actual architects of development solutions across the world. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anoushka, and I hope everyone was taking notes. All right, let's go to Pauline next.
So what can we do to face those, to build trust between young people and institutions? A lot of things, I believe. But I would perhaps quote 3 things. The first one, I think we can help, and I include UNDP actually in the question, if you allow me. But we can help create infrastructures to enable youth-led organizations and young people to not only operate, but also to network and connect between each others. So I mentioned before the example of Youth Connect that UNDP has supported in Africa. So it's just one example of how we have tried to not only build capacities of youth-led organizations, but also connect them, create connections across the region, across the continent. So infrastructures is important. But also, and Robin talked about it briefly, but the creation of safe spaces is important, online and offline, because of course we talked a bit about the digital era that we live in. So now we need to also use those tools, use the digital tools, but also ensure that protection is there. So online spaces is also important, but spaces that can guarantee young people's meaningful participation and that they can actually influence policies. So it's not only about spaces for young people to sit at the table, but to also be able to meaningfully take part in the conversation and influence policies. So I think Anoushka also mentioned it. It's we need to go away from a tokenistic approach and not only guarantee the seat, but also provide voices and make sure that they can influence the policies. One good example, and I'm sure we will talk a bit about that in the coming 2 days, but it's my major challenge, obviously. We all live in a climate crisis. And one thing that UNDP is also doing is supporting young people's participation in climate governance. So when we talk about climate governance, we talk about NDCs, nationally determined contributions. So through its climate promise, UNDP has supported a number of countries, 125 countries, in the definition of their NDCs, always ensuring that those processes, those governance processes are inclusive of young people, indigenous people, women, and local communities. So spaces. And the third one, and I promise I will wrap up, it's about access to funding. flexible funding and adapted funding for young people to implement their local and innovative solutions. And one last example that I will give in that regard, because it's very timely, is the Youth for Climate initiative that UNDP has built together with the government of Italy. And the initiative supports young people who are driving climate action across country, providing seed funding to those young people, but also mentorship opportunities and training. And I'm mentioning this because we have an open call for solutions closing on the 26th of May. So if you're planning to apply, go to the Youth for Climate website and you will have all the instructions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. I saw a lot of heads nodding in the room. So I think these are some great additions to your to-do list. Benjamin, what do you have to add?
Thank you. Everything that Anoushka said, I mean, hopefully you saw me snapping, I agreed with, and quite frankly, I have nothing additional to add. The opportunities to engage youth in global spaces like you all are doing right now is paramount. And I think one thing that Raga said at her beginning, and thank you for kicking us off that way, is that you all and the interconnections you make are much more important than anything we say on this stage. It's true. I mean, yes, we've done really cool work and are supporting youth, but the connections you all make with one another will last after these 2 days. I'm going to say that again because it's important. The connections you all make here in person and online in these 2 days are going to last. Maybe that's an initiative you all start together. Maybe that's the climate thing that Pauline just said, all of you apply. Like there are opportunities that you all now have together, the access, the information, the ability to connect. That is the thing that you should take away from these 2 days of the summit. Share your successes, share your struggles, share your engagements with one another, because you all can support one another. You're all youth, you're all at the summit, you all care about the really big challenges that face our globe. And you're all here for a specific reason. All of you are. I mean, the people you're sitting next to are, and the people online tuning in are. And so capitalize on those spaces. Start an initiative together. Support each other in current initiatives. Be each other's letters of recommendation. You see each other here today. Having this community and network is so much more valuable. And honestly, anything I can say on the stage, I won't speak for the rest of my panelists, but at least anything I can say is your interconnections are so much more valuable. So do that. Build those partnerships together. Join initiatives. Be part of YPFP or other international organizations that focus and deliberately engage with youth. That is the way forward here. And that's really what I hope you truly only listen to me is just right now, is connect with one another. Be aggressive in your LinkedIn connections. Be really connected in how you all can work on solving challenges of the globe together, here online and here in person. You are the change that we need today. So start making those connections now.
Thank you, Benjamin. I feel like I need to clap. Thank you so much for this great advice. And Robin, you will answer the last question, and then we will get a few questions from the audience.
Thanks a lot, Ala. Hard to follow, Benjamin. Real passion. It's fantastic. So the evidence from our research shows that really the most effective partnerships between youth-led organizations and established international financial institutions like the World Bank, UNDP, and other organizations are those that are built on mutual respect and shared goals. What youth-led organizations can very often bring is innovation. But connecting with, and I think Anoushka put it really, really well, the catalytic role that IFIs can play, I think is the key here. What the established institutions like the World Bank can offer are, resources, networks, and policy influence to connect to existing programming and influence governments that bring the solutions that youth-led organizations can bring to scale. And it's really about seeking those scalable solutions. I would also say that effective partnerships would probably require capacity building as well, making sure that youth-led organizations have the skills and the resources that they need in order to succeed over the long term. And so the Changemakers report that I mentioned highlights many of these things, and I won't repeat a lot of it. At the heart of it, though, is absolutely recognizing youth as agents of change. It's about voice and agency, prioritizing youth leadership and youth-centered solutions, but making sure that we have those channels and those avenues to integrate these innovative solutions into mainstream development strategies and policies. So, what works to propel youth employment? What works to propel young people's empowerment? How do we foster greater independence and well-being of young people worldwide? And our findings show overwhelmingly that we have to be more intentional about how we engage young people as agents of change, and hence the title of the report. A couple of final closing comments, if I may. One is that there are, I think, in order to create jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities for youth, these initiatives work best when they address the specific barriers that certain groups may face. For young women and girls, for example, it's often about ensuring that there's access to safe transport, childcare, access to reproductive health services, and so forth, paying attention to gender-based violence, in addition to skills and entrepreneurship. That's just one example. We've talked quite a bit about digital opportunities and AI. And I think here, of course, there are big opportunities, but there are also huge risks of leaving the most marginalized behind. If we want to be able to harness those opportunities for excluded young people, we really have to get it right and specifically address those risks. We need to make sure that everyone has access to the internet, but as my fellow panelists have said, it's not all about the internet. There are other channels, other forms of media that are essential. But I think in relation to the internet, making sure that girls and boys are safe from online forms of gender-based violence, cyber harassment, cyberbullying, and so forth, is absolutely critical. So let me end with one final comment. I'm getting evil eye from Allah. Is really that as the World Bank deepens its commitment to engaging with youth, we have to find meaningful ways to measure impact. And it goes beyond just counting beneficiaries, but how many young people are actually satisfied with the interventions, looking at the outcomes that actually matter to young people, and tracking if we're actually able to reach youth at the greatest risk of exclusion, and doing so at scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin. And I know it's very hard to keep to time when we have such important conversations. But now I will turn to our audience. And oh, wow, so many hands. The lady in the blue shirt, I think I saw you first. Yes. Can we get her a mic, please? Mike, it's on the way.
Thank you all so much for being here and speaking to us. My name is Lillian Smith. I'm from South Carolina. And I just wanted to ask more deeply about this safety aspect of development and youth-led initiatives. I want to know more about the how. How do we bring safety to these spaces? I know we can't just expect it to come about. What collaboration is being done between the World Bank and maybe another organization to make this happen?
Robin, maybe you'll take that, as she mentioned the World Bank.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. This is one very clear example where it's completely impossible for governments to try to go it alone. Most governments don't have anything like the capacity required to be able to ensure safety, particularly for women and girls in contexts of very high prevalence of gender-based violence. I was just in West Africa, as I mentioned, over the last couple of weeks, and actually last week was in Liberia and Sierra Leone. In Liberia and Sierra Leone, half of all women have actually experienced intimate partner violence, and really shocking prevalence rates. And obviously, a lot of this is the legacy of civil war in both countries, but it's perpetuated, and it's perpetuated by harmful social norms that actually normalize and lead to very high levels of acceptance of gender-based violence of many forms, including early marriage, teen pregnancy, and so forth. And these are precisely the kinds of settings where the World Bank has an environmental and social framework, and it applies across all programs that we support. And we have social specialists who are embedded in every single team. And among the various risks that we need to safeguard against are the risks of sexual exploitation, abuse, and sexual harassment. And to do that, usually it requires partnerships with civil society organizations, service providers around gender-based violence. I saw some really good examples of this just last week in Sierra Leone. So it's forging those effective partnerships and doing it in every setting where it's required. And then in addition, trying to program around the prevention of gender-based violence, including interventions that actually get to the heart of those harmful social norms, trying to address and change norms together with men and boys as allies and champions. Not easy to do, but I can tell you it's become an increasingly prominent area of programming for us across the bank, both on that risk mitigation side and on the prevention and response side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's take one more question. I see a gentleman with glasses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, you. I'm looking at you. Can you stand up?
Hi, everyone. My name is Bidemi Ojudu from Nigeria. My question is quite basic, actually, for Anoushka. What is the most effective way to set up these initiatives from a legal perspective? Do you set it up as a charity, a foundation, or a civil society?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think to answer your question, something that makes sense to you, start locally. I think every solution that you implement, doesn't matter if it's a charity, if it's a foundation, what makes sense to you and what's relevant to you and your work and your community. You don't necessarily have to have an organization with millions of dollars in budgets. You really need to start small, act locally, and think locally is what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Anoushka. I think this is great advice for everyone. And I have a great news for you. We have time for one more question. Okay, but they are 20. Young lady in pink suit? Yes. Wear bright colors. This is how people can see you from afar.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Dima Steri. I'm here representing the MISC Foundation. I'm also a current intern at the United Nations. So to start off, I want to thank each one of you for such insightful advice. I feel like I speak to everyone in the room by saying that you really motivated us. My question is to Pauline, since it's regarding the UN. I wanted to thank you first for emphasizing the importance of meaningful youth inclusion. I also wanted to ask, in your experience, what mechanism or like accountability frameworks have proven most effective in ensuring that the youth-led recommendations are not only acknowledged, but tracked, funded, and reported on within UN agencies and even like national governments?
Thank you. It's a good question, and happy to actually continue the conversation if we don't have time during the break. I will be here. But perhaps short answer. Again, I would perhaps quote the example of youth, peace and security, and more particularly the national action plans on youth, peace and security, because that's one specific area of support for us at UNDP, together with other UN entities. We support countries in developing their national action plans on youth, peace and security, which of course includes means to ensure young people's meaningful participation in decision-making processes, in civic spaces, in political processes, broadly speaking. And so in those national action plans, when we provide support to countries because this is a long process, of course. It goes through local consultations where we collect recommendations from local communities to feed into this national action plan to ensure that it's then owned by everybody in the country, that it's also owned by local communities, and that it translates into something concrete actions at the local level. And so we ensure that also those national action plans include accountability mechanism and monitoring mechanism, that it's not only an adopted document that then sits on the shelf, but that we have a clear reporting mechanism to enable a clear follow-up on the actions adopted in the National Action Plan. So that's one thing, but perhaps another example that I will be happy to discuss more with you during the break is we haven't mentioned it, but the Pact for the Future that was recently adopted in September is also inclusive. As you know, there is a whole chapter on youth and future generations, which is quite a milestone for all of us, I believe. And that also includes a number of recommendations and commitments for those accountability mechanisms. With concrete actions to be taken to ensure that there is a follow-up and that there is accountability. But happy to talk more about that later.
It's a cliffhanger. Thank you all so much for your questions. Thank you for our wonderful panelists for your time, for your insights, for your advice, and for your willingness to meaningfully engage with young people. So let's keep up the good work. And to you, please enjoy the rest of the summit, and I'll see you around. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the panelists for that insightful session. We now turn to a powerful conversation on how youth are using data and digital tools to drive peace and resilience in fragile settings. Moderating this session is Cynthia Mene, a social innovator and development finance expert. She currently leads one of IFC's largest donor-funded programs and brings deep experience from the agri-fintech and entrepreneurship space, having mobilized millions in financing for farmers and co-founded Inspire Africa, which has trained thousands of young entrepreneurs. Cynthia also serves as the content co-lead for this year's Youth Summit. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Shweta. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us around the globe virtually. And to all of you here, welcome to this exciting panel discussion at the World Bank Youth Summit 2025. My name is Cynthia Mene, and I am the content co-lead, as Shweta said. Thank you. So this session, we will be exploring how data-driven and digital solutions are empowering youth to innovate for peace and resilience. I will start by having a quick question and discussion with the panelists, and then we will open up to Q&A. So if you are online, please put your questions in the chat throughout the session. We will get to it. When it's time for the Q&A session, if you have questions, we will call on you as we've been doing. Before I introduce my panelists, I would like to start by providing a brief context to this discussion today. So as we all know, digital transformation is reshaping our world and offering unprecedented opportunities for innovation and development. And however, without intentional inclusion, it risks deepening existing inequality. And as one of our speakers, Robin, said, he highlighted the World Bank Changemakers report. So I'm going to just say a few statistics from that. So the Changemakers report mentioned that 20% of youth globally are not in education, employment, or training, with 2/3 of them being young women. And additionally, over 600 million people live in fragile contexts, facing barriers like limited internet access, where 38% of them are from rural households, unlike 72% in urban regions. And then the World Bank Digital Economy Initiative in Africa also mentioned that closing this digital divide could help boost global GDP by $13 trillion by 2030. Despite these challenges, we know that youth are at the forefront of driving digital innovations for development, leveraging data and technology to help reshape economies and foster inclusion. So this panel will discuss practical solutions and innovative models to ensure that digital transformation benefits everyone and foster a more inclusive and a resilient future. That said, I'm thrilled to be joined by a lineup of incredible speakers who are at the forefront of this work. So I will start by introducing our first panelist, Johan Bjurman Bergman. He's a digital specialist in the artificial business line of the World Bank Digital Vice Presidency, where he's helping to build the bank's country advisory and lending program on AI. He also launched and is leading a cross-cutting program to advance digital transformation in fragile and conflict-affected states. And previously, Johan invested and scaled up programs and companies that use digital technology to build human capital, create jobs, and deliver services to over more than 30 low to medium income countries. And then we also have Beverly Hatcher-Mbu. She is the Director of Policy at Development Gateway and IREX Venture. And as an international lawyer with over 10 years of experience in digitization, Beverly has led projects in 9 countries globally, and she leads oversight and policy positioning for the organization's agriculture portfolio, and also shape key messaging across the DG in AI, in digital public infrastructure, and in health. But previously, Beverly worked at the World Bank Group as a legal consultant, and she's also on the board of Accountability Lab. And finally, joining us virtually is Sinead Bovell. Sinead is a futurist and founder of WAYE, an organization that prepares youth for a future with advanced technologies, with a focus on non-traditional and minority markets. To date, she has educated over 500,000 young people, young entrepreneurs on the future of technology. Sinead has advised presidents, royalty, and Fortune 500 leaders on AI and innovation. She's also a regular tech commentator on CNN, NBC, and morning shows. And she was named as one of the top 50 voices shaping the future by Afrotech, and has won the Mozilla Prize 25 award for her work in championing open and responsible AI development. Thank you all for joining us today, and welcome. Okay, so we would start. I have like a few questions, so we'll start. So this first question, I want all our panelists to answer. Please feel free, but keep your response to at least 3 minutes for the sake of time. My first question is, drawing on the Changemakers report, emphasis on a tailored approach to different youth population. What innovative digital solutions have you developed or implemented to reach and benefit different or underserved youths, especially like women, those in marginalized groups? And also tell us, what barriers did you encounter and how did you design your solution to address those challenges? Let me start with you, Johan.
Thank you very much. So I think the example I would like to share is from our work in the West Bank and Gaza in the Middle East. I just came back from there last week. We had what we call a midterm review mission for our project, the World Bank project there, which is really supporting the IT services industry in the West Bank to upgrade its proposition and to be able to deliver more advanced services to clients. So there, it's really about not necessarily inventing or creating a specific product as the World Bank, but really acting as an enabler for others to do that. And I think that's a lot of how we think about our role as the Digital Vice Presidency, both externally as well as internally, as an enabler and a platform to support other, whether that be governments or our internal colleagues here within the bank, to really use digital tools as a way to enhance the effectiveness of solutions, improve the efficiency of those solutions, and then really replicate and scale those solutions as well. So in this particular project in the West Bank, that really looks like understanding what the main barriers for these firms are to be able to achieve higher level and higher value businesses, to be able to deliver and secure clients. And so for us, we are supporting them by addressing the skills gap that really exists and the barrier that they have to get the skills that they need to secure international clients. Second, we're addressing the lack of firms in the market by de-risking the launch of new firms. So really to grow the pie and grow the market and also grow job opportunities for those people that we help train and equip with skills. Third, we're providing access to R&D technology, so more advanced technology, which in many cases, these firms do not have the incentives and the opportunity to purchase themselves because either it's too expensive or somehow they're otherwise prevented from accessing this technology. And then fourth, we're supporting them to professionalize both their organizational structures, their marketing materials, and their product offering so that they then can go out and seek new business opportunities, whether that be in the region or globally. So really for us, it's about understanding very, very in-depth what are the barriers that these stakeholders that we're trying to support are facing, whether those be firms in the West Bank, governments in Central Africa, or our colleagues within agriculture or education, and then coming in with specific solutions that can really address those barriers and having a strong rationale for why the World Bank should be engaged based on our comparative advantage as an organization that can really bring expertise, bring financing, and bring a platform to convene partners around these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Great. I get to have my own one, I think. I'm going to be a typical lawyer for a second and answer a question with another question, which is there are two questions I think that we need to be asking when we're designing meaningfully and we're designing with young people and marginalized communities in mind. Is one, what data do we really need to solve the problem? And two, how can we model and mitigate any risks associated with that? And I start there because, and I have an example to back it up. A few years ago, Development Gateway built a dashboard for maternal and neonatal health. The idea being if we can map where maternal and infant deaths are occurring in Ghana, then we can see where the deaths are highest and use that geolocated information to help policymakers target limited resources directed at improving service delivery. We knew going into it there was likely to be some highly sensitive data. So as part of, and we'll talk about this a bit more in the panel around partnerships, but we thought a lot around what can we do to minimize, how can we make sure there's a minimum amount of data available for policymakers to actually make an evidence-informed decision around improving service delivery, but how can we protect the most vulnerable? In that case, we used location fuzzing. So there's enough geographic specificity for policymakers to be able to see where the most deaths were taking place. But then it was not so precise that you could name down to the level of the house or the individual who was impacted. Sometimes I think we overcomplicate digital development, especially in resource-constrained environments. It's not rocket science. If we want to reach underserved communities, we need to meet them where they are. So yeah, I would leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, over to you, Sinead.
Hi, everyone. And I'll try to keep it brief as well. So for us at WAYE, we focus on access to tech education and through learning about the future. So the big question that we wanted to ask when we were initially founding WAYE is what do young people in particular need to know and understand today about emerging technologies to better prepare for their future tomorrow. And we've tried various different approaches to tech education. So we have our WAYE Talk series, which initially was in person, but we realized we could reach a lot more people by moving that online. We host mentorship days because we realize not everybody is comfortable voicing their questions about the future or kind of accessing content online. But then we found open content using social media platforms where young people already are, and consistently reinforcing our message, whether it's skills, whether it's understanding how the societal impacts of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence or biotechnologies, or whether it's, what you should be studying today, was the most effective way to reach young people with a consistent message. So we put together a board, we call them the WAYE Young Leaders Board, that help guide the decisions on the content that we share, what stories are relevant, where are we in this moment, and we try to be as consistent as possible in the messaging that we share, so young people really feel like they know what skills are relevant for them today. How do I navigate the technologies that are coming down the pipeline? I think for some of us, it feels like a freight train. And what other breakthroughs do we have to look forward to it? Or to look forward to in the future. Right now, our audience, I'd say, is about over 60% women, which we're pretty happy about, and we continue to kind of grow our reach and continue to kind of grow our representation. I found even just being a first person of color at the forefront of our organization has really shaped who does feel invited to the conversations. I think even representation, it can be hard to see yourself aspiring in a lane that nobody looks like you. So that representation, we feel like has been modeled back in our audience as well. And I'd actually say the final thing, so it's one thing I think to ensure that young people are educated on the forefront, but making sure that we're in the background in the policy rooms, educating parents as well, educating educators on what they need to know to shape a future for young people in which they can thrive. So we really do that two-pronged approach. So the one is direct to young people, and then the other is the infrastructure from education to parents policy.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Johan. Really exciting to see the work you're doing to use digital tools to enhance, the effectiveness of solutions. And Beverly, you mentioned about data and how that's helping to protect those in vulnerable populations. And then Sinead, also thank you for thank you for empowering youths, empowering them with the right skills they need to thrive, and building on the when you mentioned digital infrastructure, I also want to ask one question again. So you have educated over 500,000 youths, young entrepreneurs, on the future of technology, and how can we better prepare young people to thrive in the digital economy and actively shape digital future? And then building on that, I want you to also share with us if there is any foresight-driven curricula or experiential learning model that has proven very successful to either equip underserved youths, especially young women, with the mental skills they need to thrive in this AI-driven labor market.
Yeah, and I'll actually start with the latter part of that question. So strategic foresight is a formal practice that has been used for decades. So how do you spot trends in data and understand the complex systems around them? And one thing I always like to say is nobody can predict the future, and that's not the practice that I'm in, but it's also not a surprise, right? So if you can think about what patents have recently been filed, how have different technological breakthroughs in history traditionally shaped how society has evolved? When you equip people with those skills, they can start to understand how the future may unfold, right? And so one of those skills is long-term thinking. We often, even within education, we study for the immediate unit test right in front of us. We don't think about, okay, how does what we're learning today, how could that intersect with a different technology or a different society and change how we evolve in 4, 5, 6 years, just kind of taking a different horizon. And, imagine doing even just things like what if questions, right? So what if this happened? What if X happened? And kind of mapping out different trends, which really builds a muscle for long-term thinking. And another part of strategic foresight is cross-disciplinary thinking. So we think about school often in silos. You have science, you have math, you have history, but helping students and helping young people to think at the intersection of it. So how does what you learned in history and what you also learned in science, how did those interact, for example, historically? So those are, it's a formal practice. We just don't really introduce it to young people. I happened to stumble upon it during my master's taking a course. And when I finished that course, I realized everybody needs the tools to understand the future, So we don't feel so caught off guard by it. I think for a lot of people, it feels like you're playing whack-a-mole with headlines. When you can kind of see different trends coming and anticipate how technology will impact your own job. And I actually think that's one of the best ways to prepare for a future with AI. Instead of being surprised as to how it might impact a career that you're interested in, if you start to anticipate how has this technology evolved? How have past technologies, for instance, like the internet, changed the devices we used? And what did those devices lead to? We had a smartphone that led to a creator economy. If we have a tool like AI and we talk to it more, does that mean we'll probably look at our smartphones less because we have a system we talk to? So those are types of trend lines that don't require deep technical expertise. They just require more complex thinking. And then the second part of your question was, how do we prepare people? What are the meta skills for an AI-driven world? And of course, working with AI systems as a hard skill. So, I put AI with kind of reading, writing, and working with AI. This doesn't mean knowing how to code a supercomputer, but just understanding the kind of basics of how its strengths and its weaknesses. But I think the more important skills, I would bet on somebody who had deep thinking skills and judgment skills and critical analysis skills more than somebody who just kind of knew how to prompt an AI system. Because when AI can give you 10 pretty decent answers, which one are you going to choose, right? That's a deep judgment skill. That's more complex, higher order thinking. And as the future of jobs, it's kind of up in the air as to what AI will and won't be able to do. But if you flex those muscles of judgment and critical analysis, maybe you don't consider yourself a finance person. But in a world with advanced AI systems, you might still be the best person to lead the finance department because of your judgment skills. AI does a lot of the critical analysis and the financial number crunching, and you have really good judgment. You know what scenario would be optimal for the company. So the skills in the AI age, some of them are technical, but most of them are, and I don't want to say soft skills, because I think complex thinking and deep thinking can be harder. But those are the kind of foundational skills necessary to thrive in the digital age.
Thank you, Sinead. Good to know that judgment skills is really important. And thanks for sharing that having the long-term thinking and cross-disciplinary thinking is really helpful. So I will turn to you, Johan. Given your work with the cross-cutting program within the World Bank, could you tell us how can emerging technologies like AI be harnessed in such a way that we can bridge digital divides? And how can we empower young leaders and entrepreneurs, especially those in FCV regions, to enhance the work that they do? And if you could share some use cases or prerequisites, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. So this is obviously the eternal question: how can we use emerging technologies to really help improve outcomes for young people? I think we need to think about it in two prongs, if you will. First of all, I think it's very simple. It's really getting the tech into the hands of these young people, the innovators, the entrepreneurs, and let them start experimenting with it. We are seeing some examples already of this working, right? In Nigeria, for example, a Gen AI chatbot really improved learning. It helped students in after-school learning get the information that they may get in 6 months in just 2 weeks. We're seeing in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in the mining sector, foresight-driven AI and forecasting is helping mines access the capital they need to grow, improve safety, and create good jobs. In Burkina Faso, there have been pilots with computer vision AI looking at diseases of plants and helping improve how you treat those and increasing yields by up to 30%. So we have these small pockets of pilots of results that we're seeing. And I think we need to really, really start learning as much as we can from this, gather, to your point, the data on how these are working. But then the second prong really is a bit more on the scaling side, because if we kind of continue with small pilots here and there, that is not going to have this impact that you're talking about, Cynthia. So really there, It's about understanding, first of all, what evidence do we have so far of AI or emerging technologies being able to bridge those divides? And then second, what is the approach we can take? I think for us, we know AI is different than previous technologies in the sense that it can learn, it's heavily data dependent, right? Gen AI can also create new content. Sometimes it hallucinates a little bit. It can help you do some high-skilled work. Our research or our colleagues' research here at the bank have found sort of that on the opportunities side, we're seeing AI being able to really democratize access to knowledge. So that's a positive thing. We can access, and I'm sure you've experienced it yourselves, right? Accessing really insights that you weren't able to before. It's improving productivity. It's supporting faster innovation. And it can also help on the broader level enhance services trade and close the gaps between markets, overcoming language barriers and such. But then on the risk side, we're seeing also the potential that countries that do not adopt or are not able to adopt AI quickly can really struggle in the future to create good services jobs, to create high-paying jobs, and get sort of locked into a situation of low stability and low earning jobs. It can lower the incentive to learn, because why should I go and get all these new skills when I can use AI to get them? And it can widen inequality between countries and also within countries based on who has access to AI and who doesn't. There's also a timing aspect here. Some people are saying AI will have these effects, within the next 1-2 years. Talk about AGI. I think we're trying to take a bit more of a balanced view, looking perhaps, to Sinead's point, at what can we learn from previous general purpose technologies like electricity, like the steam engine, in terms of what it took for capabilities to be translated into applications and then be adopted. This can really take a lot of feedback, a lot of testing, a lot of learning. And we're seeing with these previous technologies, it took decades to go from actual capabilities to actual adoption in the market. And so we really need to keep a good eye on the timing of these aspects as well. So in terms of the approach for FCV countries or FCV context that you're asking about, I think 3 things. First, what are we trying to use AI for? We're not going to use AI for AI's sake. We need to have a specific use case. We need to have a specific problem. And then we need to understand what specific AI technology should we be using to address this problem? Do we need generative AI? Do we need computer vision? Do we need some other type of AI technology? Second, what are the prerequisites based on that technology that we've picked? For us, we like to think about this in terms of 3 or 4 C's. The foundational connectivity and energy to really connect you to the internet. Second, compute, whether that's on the edge on your phone, in the cloud, or GPUs that are in a data center on the premise. Third, what we call context, which is really the data wrapped in strong governance and safeguards. And then the fourth, which is the competencies, like Sinead was saying, the skills really both to use, but also to build AI. And then last of all, which is really important here, is the FCS context, right? We know that on the one hand, we have the Ukraines of the world, which are classified by the bank as an FCS context. But on the other side, we also have countries like Somalia and Central African Republic. These are very, very different. And we need to understand how is those solutions potentially exacerbating drivers and risks of fragility, and how can they support the resilience that we really need to build. So in summary, really encouraging a 2-pronged approach. First, getting the tech into the hands of the young entrepreneurs and innovators and start experimenting and really learning as much as possible. And then feeding those learnings and insights into broader efforts to improve the prerequisites and build up the capabilities that you need to have impact at scale.
Exactly. Thank you, Johan, for sharing those wonderful insights. And then over to you, Beverly. I would like to focus more on policy aspect. I know your work in terms of advancing like the framework for digital public infrastructure highlights the importance of interoperability and governance in DPI. Could you, based on your experience, tell us what policy levers have proven most effective for governments in establishing data governance standards that empower youth-led innovations either in health, in agriculture, extractive industries, and beyond? And building on that, also maybe share with us, how can youth voices be integrated into the development of digital policies that impact their future?
Great, thanks. Any more questions? No, I'm just kidding. just to lighten the mood. I think Sinead and Johan have set me up really well here, because I think the core of when we're thinking seriously about data governance is its complex systems at scale. So in Nigeria, Development Gateway, we've been working with the Ministry of Health around tobacco control and tobacco use impacts on youth. It's called Data if you want to look it up. So we've set up 2 expert groups, one in survey implementation and the other in youth advisory. And we structured the program in this way because we'd learned in a pilot in DRC that we had one large expert group, and the youth voices and youth perspectives in that group kept getting lost. The expert group often went down some tangents that were quite highly technical, and we knew we were missing out on the insights we needed to shape the data use strategy for the program. And we knew if we were missing it, that our government partners were as well. So when we started up in Nigeria, we set it up in 2 structures so that there was a clear pathway in which we could repeatedly, recurrently receive and engage with youth perspectives on the data use strategy around how do we manage healthy outcomes for young Nigerians, and then setting the research priorities. So I share that example for 2 reasons. I think one, overarchingly, if we want to transform how we manage, store, and use data, aka data governance, then we've got to be very clear about how we translate insights into structure. It's great to collect lots of ideas and have space for that innovation, but it has to go somewhere. Otherwise, we spin our wheels and we'll burn people out. Young people have a lot of energy, bring a lot of energy and fresh perspective, but I don't want them to feel jaded that they're putting all these ideas out into the world and they're not translating into systemic change. So for us, what that means is we need to move away from, oh yeah, there's a young person on this committee, to here's the outcome document of this drafting committee, and we can point in clear ways to show where a youth perspective or particular communities have been taken into account in X, Y, Z ways that now form the basis of that drafting strategy, that technical program, whatever it is. I think interoperability has 3 components, but we often get stuck on the first 2. We talk a lot about data interoperability or data integration and connectedness. We talk about systems, maybe, if you're lucky, but we forget that it's fundamentally about people. And if we want digital infrastructures to expand upon the best of what humans have to offer, I think we need to be thinking in very tangible ways about how we transform the technical requirements, the policy committees, the oversight mechanisms, whatever the format is, and really think about how those venues, those avenues can espouse nuanced perspectives so that it's a feature to have nuanced perspectives and not a bug or an inconvenience.
Thank you. So you asked if there's any more questions. So I'm going to ask you one more question.
Excellent.
Can you tell us more about what partnership models have you found most effective?
So I thought about this question for a long time, probably longer than I needed to, right? Again, I did mention at the top of the hour, I'm a lawyer. I sit on things for a long time. And what I wanted to say on this topic, I think it's easy to throw out, we just need more public-private partnerships, or we just need X group of people in the room and that will fix everything. We're all looking for a silver bullet that is going to make these technologies and these approaches work. But what we actually need to be thinking about is partnership models as a constellation. In the same way that we need many stars simultaneously to see clearly at night, or clearer at night, we need to think about partnership models in the same way, especially when we're talking about inclusive digital public infrastructure. A model that DG is using in Ethiopia is engaging with universities outside of Addis to cascade a data standard around livestock, improving data and systems integration for livestock. Did you know that undergraduate and graduate students and their professors are some of the biggest users of livestock data in Ethiopia? I did not know this. Maybe you are not surprised. It was great for me to learn. But essentially, I learned from our embedded team that universities were often getting missed in a lot of these digital initiatives, these cascading and training opportunities, because they play an often informal role in translating contemporary and up-to-date research in real time in the communities where they lived and studied, and they weren't getting caught in the traditional value chain in terms of training and thinking about how we expand scale. And I think Sinead touched on this in her answer as well previously, but I think we really want digital public infrastructure and AI to be new, but I think there's a lot of power in considering these new and emerging tools on a continuum of digital transformation. And as part of that continuum, we have to talk about where we failed. We have to talk about where we have partnership blind spots. Which traditional and non-traditional partners are we not working with, but we should be? Are we thinking through where relationships are in communities and who people trust, and working with trusted partners to improve data use, to improve digital engagement, right? Are we working with imams and religious leaders? Are we working with trusted youth leaders to expand our idea of who should be in that model and how they drive scale and impact for digital initiatives? And lastly, I'll end on this point. I think it's really critical for DPI, for digital public infrastructure, to not get stuck at the payment and the ID level, divorced from services and experiences that all citizens, and especially young people, feel on a day-to-day basis. There's room for both. It doesn't have to be an either or. It can be both and we need to think about inclusive DPI, addressing power asymmetries not as an inconvenience, but as a necessity. We want technology to wish away the problems that we as humans have created, and it's not going to do that. But we can face that head on by using, DPI, whatever the next buzzword is going to be, as a new opportunity to restructure some of those partnership models and how they function.
Thank you very much. So just like you said, I think Digital Impact Alliance also mentioned that a multi-stakeholder approach to digital initiative proves 3.4 times higher than a single, sector project. And we've seen several effective models like private, public, and people partnership. We've also seen academic, practitioner collaboration, digital collaborations, as well as the cross-border tech alliance. But moving away from that, I have one last question for you, Sinead, before we take questions from the delegates. What role does storytelling and digital literacy play in empowering you to take control of their future, their digital future, and also advocate for their communities?
Yeah, I'll start with digital literacy, and I think I touched on it a little bit. Digital literacy gives you the hard skills to participate in the future. So I think digital literacy skills are the foundation. If you don't have, whether it's the know-how of how to use a tool, understanding how to navigate a tool, how to use different systems safely, and are they optimal for you, should you be there? You are essentially locked out, not just of the future, but also of the present. So I tend to see digital literacy the way I see reading and writing. I see it kind of all interchangeable as the foundation for access and the foundation for building, and also for democratic participation in many regions throughout the world. But when you combine digital literacy with storytelling, it's a really powerful intersection, because storytelling gives people a way to make sense of the technology and the change around them. And it helps to turn an abstract idea, whether that's an algorithm, whether that's data privacy, and whether that's in genetic engineering, into real relatable narratives. And so when you can craft shared stories, it actually really deepens your understanding of the technology and how it could affect you in your day-to-day life in ways that you would want it to, and then in ways that you wouldn't. And you can start to build solutions and understand aspects of resilience and prevention when it comes to technological evolution. Even asking questions, who does this empower? Who does this disempower? That really enforces digital literacy by helping people to think about how tech works and how it benefits. But I also think, perhaps even most importantly, storytelling inspires people to want to participate in shaping the future because it gives people something to fight for. And I think a lot of times the stories, and rightfully so, we tell about technology or stories what we maybe don't want to happen, or the fear of how things go wrong. But it is impossible to build towards the futures that you want if you're only thinking about the futures that you don't want. But it is great privilege to be able to have the time, the resources to pontificate on futures you do want. And that is part of the gap. I mean, there's profound power in who gets to pick the problems technology will solve. And that is part of, that's somebody's story. When we say AI is going to change this and it's going to change that, that is somebody's vision of the future. But what about everybody else? And I think storytelling is an accessible way to bring in tech literacy, problem solving in ways that are inspiring, accessible, and helpful.
Thank you very much. I have, so now I'm going to open it up to questions, but I have I'll take one question online from one of the online delegates. And this one says, what practical steps can youth-led initiatives take to build meaningful partnerships with global institutions like the World Bank, like Development Gateway, especially when working at a local level with limited resources and reach? I think Johan and Beverly could speak to this.
Do you want to go first?
No, by all means.
Excellent. Thank you, Beverly, for putting me on the spot. So the World Bank has a country-based model, which means that in all of the countries where we operate, we have local staff, whether they be from the country or internationally recruited and based there, who are in charge as task team leaders of the projects that operate in the country. So I think for youth-led organizations, and specifically since you asked on the community level and at the local level, I think it really, really starts there. So understanding who is the person or the people in that specific sector where you and your organization are trying to have an impact, change the narrative, and really work for inclusion. So understanding and finding out who those people may be. Then I think for the bank, understanding what projects are currently under implementation, what are we trying to achieve, what are those components and activities, and this is available online in the World Bank on the World Bank portal, on the World Bank's website, and then seeing how might you as a youth-led organization within that specific area engage on those components or activities, or alternatively strike up a conversation about if there is a next iteration of this project, of this technical assistance, of this analytical work, how might you engage with the people who are really taking these efforts forward? So I think really at the understanding the who the people are in your sector in the country, understanding what the current efforts are, and then through dialogue with those people, seeing where is the bank planning to go and affect change in the next 5 to 10 years, and seeing how you can really collaborate and bring those perspectives into the conversation. Thanks.
I think Johan covered most of it. So Development Gateway, I didn't mention this. We're a nonprofit. We are medium but mighty, small to medium but mighty, but we operate with the same approach and the same model. People who are living in those communities tend to know far more than we ever could, far more than I ever could sitting in Washington, D.C. I am Nigerian, but I don't live in Nigeria. And I pay attention to that positionality as much as I can, because there are always going to be people on ground who know better than I do. And my job is to help connect what they understand to other global conversations and resources as best as I can. So I think in terms of partnership, it's also about knowing your lane. And I think sometimes people are afraid to say that. So at DG, we're often a little bit further up the value chain, generally often working directly with governments on government systems at a systems level. And there aren't always avenues because we have a very narrow scope that we're building data governance or policy in particular ways. It's a fine balance that we do. We're building in particular ways with particular partners. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't work with youth groups or engage with young people, but there aren't always opportunities to, but sometimes there are. So I talked about that tobacco control program, and not because it's a youth focus, but because in general, it's about tobacco control, knowing that there are specific impacts on young people. So I think it goes a little bit to what Johan was saying, which is that you need to know where your strategy is or where your position is, and then build relationships accordingly. Talk to everybody up, down, and sideways. It's not only the people who sit on the stage, it's the people who are sitting next to you or people who are online with you in the chat, right? I think that's a part of how we build a more nuanced approach to partnerships, whether you're a part of a youth group or elsewhere.
Thank you. That's some really exciting insights. So I will open it up right now. So if you have questions, I see, let's start with, we have one person here in the front.
Hi, and thank you so much for the insightful discussion that we just had. I'm Abhishek Rodrigues, and I am an operational risk manager at UBS. So now that we see that institutions are accepting AI into their day-to-day work and institutionalizing this concept, we see that most of the employees who are working in these institutions are either reluctant or very scared of this concept, or the use of jargons and big terminologies like algorithm, AI data, and stuff like that. So while creating institutional level policies on AI and its governance, how do you think we could bridge this gap and make these policies more accessible to the employees? Because it has to, any policy has to be understood by the people who are utilizing or are impacted by it. So on an organizational basis, how do you think this gap can be bridged out?
Thank you. I also want to take another question, then we can answer both. Okay, we have a young lady just right in front here. Please make your question brief.
Yeah, okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. My name is Vanshika Arora. I'm a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania. And my question is, how do you kind of see some of these like solutions that you're seeing that are very digital focused? For example, we talk about AI. How do you see that kind of interacting with energy systems in some of the countries that you're working with, especially since these technologies are very like resource intensive? And if nations are kind of already struggling with energy insecurity, resource insecurity, like water as well, like how does that kind of, are there any like challenges and opportunities there to cut for like these small companies to kind of be sustainable from the get-go as they're kind of developing in these early stages?
Thank you. Sinead, I would like to start with you. If there's any question that you could respond to.
Sure, and I can kind of briefly respond to both. I'd say for the first question, how do you ensure that people who may be intimidated by technology want to adopt it in an organization, especially when policy and guidelines and best practices aren't always interpretable by the average person? What I have found in my experience in going into different organizations is building champions within the company. So whether it's in a specific sector of the company or a specific team, having somebody that can kind of be that bridge, that communicator between people who are building the policies, who have the in-depth knowledge about the tools, and then they're also very comfortable with the teams that they work on. And there's already a system of trust and shared kind of terminology, shared communication, and they know their team best. And so they kind of become this champion for how AI gets deployed and ensuring that nobody in the organization gets left behind. And then the second question about energy and water systems, I mean, general purpose technologies, they build on each other, and so do the problems and the challenges. So whoever doesn't have access to electricity probably doesn't have adequate access to the internet, and likely won't have as much consistent access to artificial intelligence. And that is the reality. So we still have to bridge and fix historical issues, because people will then just continuously be systemically and structurally left out of the future. When it comes to energy with artificial intelligence, I believe we actually do have some of the solutions. I mean, clean energy solutions exist. They're just more expensive. But that is a choice that companies are choosing to not make. So I think that we don't have to be in this AI energy crisis the way that we are. Water is a different story. We're going to have to figure out where it makes sense to build certain data centers that are water intensive. And I know right now most of the data centers are being built in deserts, which kind of doesn't make the most sense when we think about complex systems thinking. But when it comes to energy, there's a company in Canada that uses solar panels for their data grid. So there are ways around it. We just have to make different choices. And that's really what the future comes down to. We have most of the solutions if it's a technical problem, but some of the most challenging problems we face are actually human choices that we are choosing to not make.
Thanks for sharing. I'll take 2 more questions. Okay, so I have one lady down there putting on the blue. Yeah, please stand up. Yes.
Hi, I'm Amina Mustafa, and thank you for talking to us about this. I have a question particularly for Johan. He mentioned that basically the technology should be made accessible to the youths in general, but I'm just curious to know that, for instance, in youth who are in conflict-affected areas, like how do you ensure that these technologies are made accessible to them, and especially in terms of like funding infrastructure and like policy gaps in youth affected area, basically?
Thank you. Any other question? Okay, some more hands over there.
Hi, my name is Amber Fezzi. I work at United Nations Foundation. First of all, I just want to say thank you guys for talking today. It's really inspiring to hear people who are not skeptical about youth views. My question is, so I wrote my capstone in economics on artificial intelligence, so I'm really curious to see how the conversation evolves, but I think that many of us in this room, AI and digital futures are intuitive in a sense, like it shaped our cognitive frameworks. So I'm curious, I know that there's a lot of talk about tokenization of youth views and their perspectives, but I'm curious kind of about the reciprocal learning, intergenerational. How do we ensure that this is not just tokenization or an ideal we aim for, but it's an actual institutional practice within the systems we work in, and that youth voices aren't always heard with skepticism? Thank you.
Thank you. So Johan, you could answer the first question, and then maybe Sinead and Beverly can take the second.
Definitely. Thank you for this one. It's a very difficult one, and I would really encourage you to continue thinking about it. I think the framework that I tried to lay out a bit when I made the first remarks, which really looks at sort of AI for what are the specific gaps, and then what is the specific context, is a useful one to really think about it from sort of a policy and an investment side. But I think within these contexts that are affected by fragility, conflict, and violence, these are all sort of more exacerbated, these challenges in many ways, because when we talk about FCS context, it really also brings in resource constraints that are much more potent than those in many other countries. So any dollar invested in infrastructure towards unleashing AI technology or making it accessible to young people may be a dollar that's deprioritized from something else, like health or education, etc. The policy side, we have oftentimes very weak policy frameworks in key areas that we know that we need to responsibly deploy AI, data protection, data privacy, cybersecurity, etc. Right? And we also, on the other hand, have very low capacity within the public sector often to strengthen and implement and enforce the policies that are there. So that's a second challenge. And then I think a third challenge is that often we see that the foundations for human capital, education, health, are also much weaker in this context. So we start from a much lower position. So in some sense, the approach that we may want to take is to look at what can we do that is both beneficial to addressing these human capital policy and infrastructure aspects as it relates to AI, but also as it relates to societal development more broadly. So what we think about as no regrets investments. And so from the digital standpoint, we think about this in the framework of those 4 C's, right? Connectivity and energy, to Sinead's point about, really being able to provide sustainable energy and connectivity with that. The current M300 initiative that the World Bank and the African Development Bank and partners are rolling out across Africa, I think is a really, really good example of this, which then is also paired with connectivity. The second one is on the compute. How do we ensure that we roll out devices that can be used for those small AI applications and then provide access to the cloud through the connectivity? How do we help countries think about data as, in some sense, the new oil, right? As an asset that they can develop to then also tailor AI solutions that work for them. And then third, providing those skills, which to Sinead's point as well, right? At the very basic level, these are digital literacy skills with some tweaks to understand how do they apply around AI. So I think if we can make those no regrets investment in a very intentional way that doesn't take away from other key investments, then that is a path that can be sustainable. Thanks.
Okay, for the sake of time, we might not be able to take the last one. So, but I want you to, we've learned a lot about how to overcome challenges with AI, data, and skills gap. We've also learned a lot on how to drive innovations to ensure a more inclusive and resilient future. So I would like to encourage you all to continue to innovate for a more inclusive and resilient future. And because your innovation matters and we care about it, and we want to make sure that they continue to make the impact and drive more solutions that impact or help people, especially in, marginalized community. So thank you all for listening to us, and thank you to our panelists for this session. We're excited to have you once more. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.